A bunch of you have been asking me to cover the Dark Gaia Sonic Infection AU, and this one was much better than I expected. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with the Dark Gaia if you played the game called Sonic Unleashed, and in that game, we saw that Eggman released Dark Gaia and tried to use him to create what he called Eggman Land. But instead, he almost destroyed the world. Luckily, Sonic and Light Gaia were actually able to beat Dark Gaia back and save everyone from the darkness. And this AU shows what happens when Eggman awakens Dark Gaia again, and spoilers, it goes terribly. Now this AU starts off with Eggman signing in to report on what has been happening with Dark Gaia, and as this picture here kind of gives away, the planet has literally shattered. But that isn't all. The world is also infested with contaminated animals that Eggman have named like the infected or infected nightmares, and they look like this. And as you can see in this image, there are different levels to this infection. And while all three are dangerous, the infected nightmares are the most dangerous because they can walk around in the daylight, while the other ones will still need to go hide while the sun is out. The other reason that the infected nightmares are so dangerous is because they have the virus within them and they can actually spread it just like regular zombies. But instead of it passing through bites, the virus is passed through scratching, which in my opinion is worse. I think it's way easier to avoid getting bit than avoiding getting scratched. But the good news is that it takes 2 days for the wounded person to be fully infected, and if Light Gaia, or aka Chip, can get to them in that time frame, he can extract the virus from them with his light energy. And this is actually how Tails manages to survive after he is infected, which we'll see a little bit later. Now, something that I found really interesting here is that Silver is completely immune to the virus, which in reality he shouldn't be. I'm curious though if the creator is playing off the theory that Silver is like a long lost relative to Shadow, which is a popular fan theory. But as of right now, we don't actually know why Silver is immune. After that, we get to see what happens if Chip is not able to heal people in time, which means that people have gone into stage 2 of the infection. And at this stage, their fur, scales, and feathers will start to fall out, giving animals that naked mole rat look. Partner. In the third stage, the victim will start to become very irritable, their bones will get super brittle, and they'll get all kinds of like spots all over their exposed skin. And at stage 4, this is when the character starts to actually mutate, and the pain is so intense that they also start to lose their mind at this point. And if no one is able to put the creature out of its misery, they will continue to mutate until they hit stage 5, and at this point, they are fully under Dark Gaia's control and will be used like a puppet and forced to attack anyone they see. Now, during this time, we also have the initial stat sheets for all the characters, starting with Sonic, who is traumatized at this point because he almost lost Tails to the infection. But other than that, he actually isn't doing too bad. Next, we see Tails, whose health is way down because he took a scratch to the chest, but at this point, we know that he does end up being saved. What I find more interesting here, though, is that he says we need Eggman, which is how we know that things are really bad right now. Next, we see an outline for Knuckles, who is missing with Rouge, and it seems like they went off to find the Master Emerald. Silver has been fighting non-stop this whole time pretty much, making sure to take advantage of the fact that he is immune. Unfortunately, though, Amy has been confirmed as dead. It seems like she ended up sacrificing herself to protect Cream, which is very much in her character, so I'm not surprised about that. But what did surprise me was that Big is completely fine, although he is sad that he lost his frog. But the same cannot be said about Espio, who ended up getting infected and had to have his leg amputated. And sadly, Vector was also with him at the time, but he ended up getting scratched on his face, so there is no way for them to actually amputate that. Next, we see that Shadow is kind of healthy, but he went into shock after watching Omega die, so now he isn't really eating or drinking anything. But one important thing that I want to note is that he has taken off his inhibitor rings, which lets you know that he is not messing around because there hasn't been a whole lot of times where he's done this. We also see that Infinite the Jackal has fallen victim to the corruption and is at stage 2, which will definitely be an issue moving forward because this guy was pretty strong even before the infection. Blaze also appears in this AU, and luckily she's clean because she's another character that is really powerful and would be a pain to deal with if she was infected. We also see Cream here, who is safe because Amy Rose sacrificed herself to save her, and while she is traumatized, she's unharmed. We also get this outline of Omega, who is my favorite character, and we see that he fell into the Earth's core and then disintegrated, but we will learn a little bit more about how he actually got into that situation. Chip, aka Light Gaia, is still alive, but he seems to be having a much harder time dealing with Dark Gaia for some reason. You would think that since they already beat him once, the second time would be a lot easier, but I'm assuming that the creator is adding some type of twist in this AU. And lastly, we see that Eggman is still alive and well, and for the most part hasn't had any consequences for releasing this horror on the world. But I think that's mostly due to the fact that now they actually need him if they're going to beat back Dark Gaia. Next, we get the second log file, and this one is from Tails' perspective, and it has been 13 days since Dark Gaia has been released, and since Knuckles and Rouge have been missing for about a week now, they have decided to go look for them. We also learn that at this point the Chaos Emeralds have lost their power, and all the temples were destroyed inside the core of the planet when Sonic and Chip first defeated Dark Gaia. And this is why they're so desperate now to find Knuckles and Rouge and the Master Emerald. But judging by this image here, the Master Emerald cracking, I wouldn't be surprised if Dark Gaia somehow managed to crack the Master Emerald, and now they're going to have to find a bunch of shards later on. In this log, we also learn that the infected nightmares cannot infect people while the sun is up, because they lose Dark Gaia's energy during that time. But this isn't actually a good thing, because in order to get some of that energy back, these nightmares will start devouring people, or Mobians, which in actuality is how Amy Rose died. They ate her as a source of energy. After that log, we get to see one from Shadow next, and we learn that 45 days have passed since the release of Dark Gaia. And Shadow has gotten word from Eggman that he found Rouge, so of course Shadow is rushing over to see her. While he's heading over there, we learn that many of the Mobians have started to cut off their fur or their quills because the infected creatures can grab anything within like a 35-yard radius in about a second, which means that they can grab anyone who's about 100 feet away from them very fast. And even in a world where people have super speed, that is still a pretty big deal, especially if the infected are smart enough to actually ambush people. We also get to hear Shadow recount how much it hurt watching Omega die, and it turns out that he was pulled down to the core of the earth by one of the infected. But more importantly, he talks about taking off his inhibitor rings and fighting the infected. And he says that even with his rings off, they were still surprisingly strong and that he only barely made it out. And anyone who's familiar with Shadow knows that this is a huge deal because either the creators have like nerfed this guy really bad or these creatures are just extremely powerful. After that, we see that Shadow finds Cream, who was hiding after being saved by Amy, and he takes her back to Tails' laboratory. After that, we see that Shadow did end up getting scratched at some point, but as to be expected, he is completely immune to the virus. And now that he is reunited with the rest of the group, he at least has some support. But that feeling doesn't last long because as he goes to actually open the door that Rouge is supposed to be behind, we see this image of her. And if you can't tell, she is now fully corrupted, which means that her mission to get the Master Emerald definitely failed. And when you look over at the 6-week stat sheet, we see that Knuckles is also corrupted and they are both labeled as danger level extreme. I also want to highlight a few characters here, starting with Sonic again, and we see that his stress level is almost at 100%, and this is likely due to the fact that most of his friends have already been infected or just straight up taken out at this part. And this is likely why he isn't allowing Tails to go out into the field or to help with much of anything outside of research. Metal Sonic also appears in this series, but he's already beat to hell and is just being used as like a sentry drone at the moment. Silver is still doing pretty good, just acting as like a protector for the lab and giving Tails and Eggman more time to figure out this virus. While Jet has also stepped up and is now acting as the head of the rescue team, trying to find and save as many Mobians as he can. And honestly, I kind of like that more of these infection AUs are adding Jet and his crew in here and kind of giving them a more heroic role. I've always liked Jet and it's kind of cool to see him kind of step up as a leader. I also want to point out that he has a Master Emerald shard in his inventory, which kind of explains why they showed us that quick visual of the Master Emerald cracking. And while that does suck, the good news is that if they can collect all these shards, the Master Emerald should still work just fine. Next we see Espio, and he's still alive, and now he has a robotic leg. And while the team obviously needs his skill, he is hell-bent on revenge and has taken off to find the infected that took his leg and also infected Vector. Shadow is still grieving because now he's lost both Omega and Rouge, so I really can't blame him for kind of being depressed. But luckily, we see that both Charmy and Cream are doing just fine, but I don't think that they really understand what's going on at this point. The adults in this AU are actually doing a really good job kind of keeping them shielded from all this chaos. Most of the credit for that probably going to Vanilla, who even though she has lost an eye, is still keeping everyone healthy in the lab. Now, Blaze, on the other hand, is not in the lab, but rather seems to be trying to find a way to make it into the core of the Earth so that she can find the Gaia Colossus. And I find this kind of odd because I'm pretty sure that the Gaia Colossus bosses is a combination of the Chaos Emeralds and Chip, but maybe this is like a twist that the creator has added in the AU, or maybe I'm just not remembering it properly because that game is like 14 years old. We also see that Chip is still spending all his energy healing people, when in reality, he should be spending his power trying to actually stop Dark Gaia. There's obviously no way that he can out-heal the infection by himself, and it seems like he's on the verge of passing out already. And lastly, we get to see Eggman here in his hazmat suit, and we see that he's doing research into these infected creatures. And I'm assuming that he's the primary reason that we're able to learn so much about the infected and split them into different categories based on threat level. And this little like symbol of him in the background here kind of gives that away. The next stat chart in the series takes place 11 weeks, or aka 77 days into the infection, and the first character we see is Sonic, and he has managed to find Amy Rose's hammer, and he's hell-bent on protecting his friends. Something that I find alarming with him though is that his vein here is green, as if some kind of infection is taking root inside of him, and while it's hard to read, I think it says that his blood is contaminated, although I don't think that he's been infected by Dark Gaia, but rather something else. I say this because we already seen that Sonic doesn't fall victim to Dark Gaia, but rather uses that energy to turn into Were Sonic. And while it's hard to say right now, I feel like Sonic may be infected with something to do with Light Gaia as a way to kind of combat all the darkness, especially since his vein is green, which is the color of Chip's power if I remember correctly. Next we see that Tails is still safe, but Sonic is not allowing him to leave the lab, and I think eventually this is going to cause Tails to go against Sonic and sneak out anyway, which I'm sure would lead to him getting infected again. But hopefully I'm wrong here, because they have managed to gather a ton of the Master Emerald shards, so maybe that will keep Tails occupied so he doesn't go off and do something stupid. As to be expected, we see that Chip is starting to fade out, unable to keep up the pace of healing so many Mobians, and I wouldn't be surprised if he starts to lose his mind, especially since his stress level is already at 100% and his health is nearly gone. Silver, on the other hand, seems to be thriving in this new world. Not only is his stress level super low, but his powers are getting even stronger, making him better able to handle the infected creatures. Blaze is still trying to make her way to the Earth's core, but she's been stopped by the sight of something, although they don't actually let us see what it is. I'm thinking that she's probably found like a huge hive of infected, but that's just my guess for now. But I think what's more important is that we see that she's managed to collect 3 of the Master Emerald shards, which means that they are probably getting pretty close to having all the pieces they need. After that, we learn that SPO is now dead. He did manage to find and take out the infected nightmare that got him in Vector, but then he was attacked by and overpowered by Infinite. And this means that Charmy is the only person left from their group. And you can tell that the knowledge of that is definitely stressing him out, but luckily Vanilla is still there to take care of him, and also Cream, who has managed to reunite with Cheese. Big is still missing, although Jet and his crew have been on the lookout for him, and while those 3 are a bit beat up, overall they've been holding their own pretty good in this AU, Wave taking the most damage with a missing arm here. Next, we see that Shadow's stress levels are still almost maxed out, and he has become determined with the idea of curing Rouge, even taking a sample of her blood. Although we don't know what he's actually planning to do with it, and in all honesty, I don't even think he knows what he's going to do with it. But since he has lost his 2 favorite people, I can't really blame him for not thinking rationally. Eggman is still researching the infected, but it feels like he's not making the progress that he should be, considering that they're already 11 weeks into this outbreak. But I guess at least he did fix Metal Sonic, so at least the guy has legs again. Now after that, we get the final scene of the AU where Chip is talking to us, and he's saying that your work means nothing. You will not win. Sonic, you don't understand. You will not win. I am the light forever burning. I am the light forever burning. And my theory as of right now is that since Chip has been telling us that his powers are fading, I think he's becoming more and more susceptible to the Dark Gaia's power. And as he's been trying to save the infected Mobians, some of that dark energy has made its way into Chip's body, slowly breaking down his immunity. And now that he's weak enough, the darkness has actually broken through. The only saving grace here is that the team seems to have a lot of the Master Emerald shards, so maybe in the next part they can actually use that power to allow Chip to transform, and with the help of Sonic, Shadow, and Silver, he should be able to take out Dark Gaia. But those are just my thoughts for now. We'll have to wait until the next episode to see what happens. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video on the screen here. Subscribe today to become a member of the Orange Force, and we'll see you tomorrow with another video. Peace, peace.